Good evening and welcome to a special show here on NCAA.com aimed to amp up the anticipation of both the Division III basketball tournaments. I'm your host, Will Haskett. When both tournaments tip off on March the 4th, it will have been 727 days between tournaments. It has been over 1,000 days since we last crowned champions in Division III basketball. Some might argue that the 2022 championships are the most anticipated in D3 history. When the pandemic shut down the 2020 championships, there were 16 teams remaining in both the men's and the women's brackets. Today, we're going to unveil the top 16 teams in each sport as determined by the selection committees this week. This was just a trial run to get both committees prepared for the actual selection process, which will culminate with the full selection shows on February 28th, seen right here on NCAA.com. All right, a quick note, these rankings today of the top 16 have no future bearing on seeding, placement, or host selection. It's merely a snapshot of the top 16 resumes in the country as determined by the committee based on competition through this past Sunday. It all helps to increase our appetite for postseason basketball. A reminder on these selection criteria that the 10-member committees will use to not only select the 64 teams, but determine who hosts, identifying the 20 at-large berths, and how teams are placed in the bracket from 10 different regions. The primary set of criteria deals with the team's performance against fellow D3 schools. There is no preferred order to what you see on your screen, with win-loss percentage, head-to-head, common opponent record, results versus ranked teams, and strength of schedule. The secondary set of criteria does allow for consideration of performances against non-Division III competition and also non-conference strength of schedule. Measurements that we enjoy discussing as fans, such as RPI, public polls, conference standings, and that dreaded eye test, are not factored into the selection process by the committee. All right, now with all of that said, let's dive into the committee process a little bit and unveil the top 16 teams at this very moment as determined by each of our committees. We will start with the ladies first, and before we get to numbers 16 through number 1, I'm pleased to be joined by the chairwoman of the Division III Women's Basketball Committee. She is Megan Wilson, who also serves as the Associate Athletic Director at Luther College. Hey, Megan, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing just fantastic, and I know this is kind of a culmination of a couple of days of hard work for your committee, but sort of walk us back. We mentioned off the top of this show, it's been a long time since we've had a championship, let alone an actual champion in this sport. So to get your committee kind of, I guess, early season reps, if we were to steal a basketball sort of phrase in it, to get this process sort of rolling, what have the last couple of days been like as you scrub through the data to come up with the top 16 teams in the sport?
Yeah, so it's been a great exercise for our committee, going through the data, the primary criteria, the secondary criteria, and just looking at the best teams in each of the 10 regions, and just, it was a good exercise for us to kind of comb through and get ready for selections and what bracketing will look like here coming up on the 27th. So, it was important for us to do this exercise and be thorough and do our due diligence to get the best 16 teams there are.
And most importantly, it's kind of a fun opportunity for you guys to work through this process with the actual bracket coming in 11 days' time. But as you look at those criteria that we sort of mentioned, how do you prioritize when you're looking into the first level of criteria, the secondary criteria? Is there a priority, or is it all putting it sort of together into a blender and then just sort of seeing how that ranks teams out for you guys?
I think for us, it's really important looking at all of the criteria. And, we talk all the time about the team's total resume. It's not just their win-loss percentage. It's not just their strength of schedule, head-to-head or results versus common or ranked wins. So all of that has to come into play. And I think you want to think about putting the best field of teams out there. And so it's a combination of the criteria. I don't think one outweighs the other. It's good to have 10 different perspectives on the committee with our 10 regions now, and just to make sure we try to get it right and stay as consistent as possible.
All right, it's time to share the fruit of y'all's labor, as we would say over the last couple of days. The top 16 teams as your committee has determined. You stay right there. We're going to dive into the very first one. We're going to count backwards from 16 to the top spot as the committee thought. So as we go to number 16 on this list, and that belongs to Messiah in this exercise. A solid record, including wins in 14 straight this season. This is a team that made the Final 16 back in 2020, only to have its tournament abruptly ended by the pandemic. They feature the top scoring defense in the MAC Commonwealth, holding opponents below 50 per game. Number 15 belongs to Ithaca, trying to make it to the tournament for a 17th time. This team has rattled off 15 straight after starting the season 5-3. The resume is building thanks to the Liberty League's top scoring defense, coupled with the best shooting percentage in conference, where Grace Cannon leads the way, making nearly 50% of her shots and a team-high 15.6 points per game. Checking in at number 14 in the exercise is Gettysburg, also no stranger to postseason play. They would love to make a deep run for the first time in program history. Momentum is carried over from 2020, allowing this team to be in position for the program's first back-to-back-to-back tournament appearances. Points are hard to come by in the Centennial Conference. This team is 4th in the nation in scoring defense, but only 3rd in the conference. Number 13, a rising program in the sport, Mary Hardin Baylor, has just arrived to the Final 16 for a second consecutive year back in 2020 when everything stopped, and the 2-year wait to try and make it to the national quarterfinals has certainly been hard, but this team is ready. 19-0 since dropping 2 of its first 3 games of the season, including a perfect trip through the conference to this point. A dozen to go. It begins with powerhouse Hope checking in next. The 2-time national champions haven't missed the field in a decade and don't look like this year will be one with that much rust on it either. This team is winning games by over 41 points per. That leads the nation. The only team in the nation in the top 5 in both scoring offense and scoring defense. This team is also so deep, no player is averaging more than 10.5 points per game this season. All right, just missing out on the top 10. Number 11, 2007 and 2013 national champion DePauw. The Tigers have good size and discipline, lead the nation in rebounding margin. And since slipping a couple of times around the holidays, including one to Messiah, who's ranked 16th earlier, DePauw has run off 10 straight as it looks for berth number 22. Into the top 10 we go. It starts with NYU. The 1997 national champs entered a 3-year tournament drought in 2020 before losing in the second round. This season, just the one loss on the record and a top 10 shooting offense in the country entering this week. The only loss came on the road to Rochester, which they avenged a week later with an 18-point win at home. Number 9 is Trine, which would make its 5th straight tournament if that spot holds. One of the best defenses in the country is giving up less than 50 per game, and they've also won 13 straight, including every game played here in 2022. And one of those wins was a statement victory over Hope, whose name we just mentioned a couple of spots ago in January. That came on the road in front of over 2,000 raucous fans. That avenged a loss from back in December, which happens to be the last loss before this current streak that Trine finds itself on. The 8th spot belonging to Scranton, poised for the program's 34th appearance in the tournament, more than any other D3 school. The 1985 national champions are in the midst of a 16-game winning streak, but it includes surviving a couple of games in overtime this season. Obviously, nothing guaranteed in this position between now and Selection Monday. Number 7 belongs to UW-Whitewater. The data coming from before the Warhawks actually lost to Wisconsin-Oshkosh last night. They turned it over 16 times in that game, losing the turnover margin by 6 to their opponent, but that's very rare. This is a team that's top 10 in the country with a +9 turnover margin this season. It'll be a battle down the stretch for the program's 20th tournament appearance. Continuing on with the list, Smith is next. They made back-to-back tournaments for the first time in program history back in 2020 and is in a great position to make it 3 straight. They're the top shooting team in the NEWMAC right now, top 10 in the country in that efficiency. They've also won 11 straight entering the weekend. The last team to beat Smith chimes in next, 1 spot above them. It's Tufts in a great position to earn the program's 13th tournament appearance. Back-to-back national runner-up finishes seem forever ago, with no champions being crowned in the sport the last 2 seasons. The NESCAC always producing teams capable of big runs. The Jumbo's ability to shoot the 3 is 6th best in the country. Will certainly help trying to make another run to a national championship game appearance. I mentioned the loaded conference. The hits keep on rolling. No surprise to see Amherst ranked high in the 4th spot. They beat Tufts in the only meeting so far this season. That was back on January the 15th, and that was part of a streak where they have won 11 of 12, holding every opponent below 60 points in that current run. The 3-time national champions were left wondering in 2020 if it could have been title number 4, but they are looking forward to a full run now here in 2022. We dive into the top three now, starting with the team using the hiatus to position itself for a tournament run. Simpson hasn't made the field since 2013, but certainly looked poised to end that drought in a real way. And the team can flat out shoot it, leading the nation in field goal percentage, free throw percentage, and three-point percentage. Winners of 19 straight, scoring 86 points per game. Just missing the top spot, Transylvania, which will gladly sacrifice one position now for perhaps the final top spot at the end of the tournament. This program has never made 3 tournaments in a row, but 2022 appears to be the end of that note. Undefeated and with a top 10 scoring margin of nearly plus 25, there's a lot to like about this team heading towards March. And the top spot in the sport at the midway point of February belongs to Christopher Newport, national semifinalist twice before. Maybe this is the team to get that championship game for the first time. That was the thought 2 years ago before the pandemic ended title hopes with 4 possible games remaining. This year, the undefeated team scores 87 per game, shoots 47% from the floor, and has a plus 13 turnover margin. All of those are top 4 in the country. All right, so there you have it, 16-1 in the eyes of the committee. And again, that is right now. Things can obviously change over the next couple of weeks. We bring Megan Wilson back in to sort of talk about this process. All right, we look at these teams, and it doesn't have to necessarily, Megan, be 1 versus 2 or even 15 versus 16. When you look at how good these 16 teams are, what became little separators for your committee when it came to trying to slot in these particular 16 teams into their slots?
Yeah, I think all of these 16 teams and many more that were discussed just have really impressive resumes. Obviously, some of the things we focused on were win-loss percentage. I don't think any team here had more than 3 losses so far this year. They all have very great strength of schedules and have played quality opponents. We did look at ranked wins, and with us ranking more teams this year, I feel like ranked wins, there's more of them, obviously, with more regions and us ranking so many per region, but those are the things that we really focused on. And we also dove into those wins and losses over ranked teams and where those teams sat in each region. So I think it was a collaborative effort. There wasn't a lot of results versus common when you look at different regions, but each region had a voice, and I think these 16 teams have done tremendous work to earn their spots in this top 16.
And for people who are a bit unfamiliar with what this process means, not just for having these 16 teams in the actual bracket, but why those 16 teams will become so important when it comes to the actual selection, when it comes to hosts, when it comes to all these things that can be a huge advantage for a team, why this is an important exercise for what would be the real product coming up on February the 28th.
Yeah, I think it's a great exercise. On the 27th and 28th, it's so condensed. It was great for the committee. We've had a lot of turnover. We haven't had a championship in 2 years. And so for us to go through this process and kind of teach some of the new committee members and kind of go through what it may look like on that 27th and 28th on Monday, it was just great for them to have the experience going through it without being able to do it until that date. So I think we're just all really, really excited for our student athletes to have a championship to play for. And, these teams and many others are very deserving of that. So we're really excited.
Safe to say the anticipation's at an all-time high?
Safe to say.
Megan, thank you so much for your time. Congratulations to this point. I know it was a fun exercise to work through the work. The real work really begins in a couple of weeks, but I know your committee is going to be ready. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, that is one half of our reveal showdown. The men are up next as our top 16 Division III men's and women's basketball unveiling continues.
There's an energy swelling out beyond the limits of your expectations. A universe where fandom reigns supreme. Once you're in it, it changes you. Instead of one, you're one of many. A blissful sea of chaos. Go beyond your limits and enter the NCAA universe. Get your seats today at ncaa.com/tickets.
Welcome back to the 2022 Division III Basketball Top 16 Reveal Show. And while this unveiling has no real bearing necessarily on what we will be announcing in just 11 days, it does offer a nice little preview of anticipated setup for both of the tournaments. And before we get to the top 16 men's teams, it's my pleasure to introduce the chair of that committee, Mike Schauer, who's in his 13th year as the head men's basketball coach at Wheaton. Hello, Mike. How are you?
I'm great, Will. Thanks for having us on. We're excited to do this.
No, my pleasure. I want your coach's perspective on all of this, and not necessarily just the bracketing or the selection sort of process, but what's the last couple of years? I mean, the sport shut down, and to have not just the anticipation, but what we sort of learned in the interim and putting together a whole committee from a coaching standpoint, how did you approach this exercise with the real full dress run coming up in a couple of weeks?
Yeah, it was a great exercise for our committee, Will. I mean, obviously we ended 2020 with 16 teams left, and they were arguably the top 16 teams in the country. So it's great to kind of be introducing the top 16 teams here in 2022 to kind of build the momentum towards our tournament. And we did it just like we're going to do Selection Sunday. We had the 10 teams in each region, and we selected a team and then moved another team up. So it was a great kind of practice run at what we're going to do here in a few days. And honestly, Will, it was one of the best calls we've had. It was great momentum for our committee. It was a lot of fun, and just excited to be at this point. And from a coach's perspective, it's just fun to be talking about having a tournament and putting it together. This is the best time of the year for those of us who do this professionally. And so from a coach's perspective, it's just great to have this momentum and to be at this point.
No doubt about it. When we talked about those criteria a little bit, and obviously you're right there in the mix of it. You're held to W's and L's, at a higher standard than a lot of other folks even are in the industry. So when you look at that from a coaching standpoint, you look at all these criterias, you see these teams. It's hard not to apply an eye test when it comes to putting these teams into a blender and mixing them up. What does this process teach you, and then how have you as the chair sort of worked with other committee members to find what is that perfect marriage, I guess, of the data?
Yeah, I mean, we simply have to have integrity in the process. And so we attempt to work very hard to maintain consistency in the application of the criteria, so that, the 5 primary criteria and the secondary criteria when it comes into play, that we simply look at the numbers as they are and take out the eye test, take out where a team might be ranked in the top 25, that type of stuff, and just eliminate all of that. And really just take into account what the criteria is telling us about that team's total resume. And you get better at it the more times you do it. And you really just have to kind of stay consistent, I guess, and hold each other accountable. The other 9 members hold each other accountable that we're following the process from the beginning to the end through all 10 regions.
All right, all of that work has led to 16 teams and what your committee feels are the best 16 teams in the country right now. So just as we did with the women's teams, we will count down from 16 to the top team after the committee deliberated all of that data and criteria as of February the 13th. So number 16 and the team that just snuck into the show today, that would be Swarthmore, top 5 team, or essentially the top team from Region 5. A perfect 5 wins without a loss against ranked teams in the region earns them this spot. The national runner-up in the last completed tournament. This team was poised to go for one more win in 2020 before the season was cut short. The wait hopefully will be worth it here in a couple of weeks. Number 15 is Williams, which has certainly been tested through a difficult region and, of course, a difficult conference. A solid shooting team from distance. They lead the NESCAC. The 2003 national champions are hoping the final difficult 2 weekends of this season will position them for hosting duties and a strong pathway back to the national championship. Checking in next at 14 is St. Joseph of Connecticut, which is perfect so far this season in 22 games. Leading the nation in field goal percentage defense certainly helps, but the offense shoots it at a high clip too. The program made its first D3 tournament in 2020, but that first postseason step seems like a really long time ago. March can't get here quickly enough for the lone unbeaten team left out of 411 schools around the country. Lucky 13 now for UMass Dartmouth, and what a season this could end up being if this position holds until the 28th. It's been 13 long years since the team last made a postseason tournament. The Corsairs have brought it when it matters the most this season, winning 4 games against ranked opponents. The 12 spot goes to WPI, which returned to the tournament in 2020 after a 3-year absence, and it feels about the same to get to this potential opportunity in 2022. The record speaks for itself, as does the team's commitment to the little things, leading the NUMAC in assist-to-turnover ratio and protecting the 3-point line better than most teams in the country. Stockton is the lone representative from Region 4, but owns more wins over ranked opponents this season than every team we will list today other than the top one. That's a bit of a spoiler there. Checking in at the 11th spot and almost a top 10 resume. This team hasn't made the tournament since 2016, but with DJ Campbell and company deadly from three-point range, certainly a team that can get hot and make a deep run. Into the top 10 we go, starting with Wisconsin lacrosse, which has played one of the most difficult schedules in the country to earn its place here. On pace to earn just the program's third tournament berth, this is a team eager to earn its first tournament win and can do so with the WIAC's top shooting mark so far this season from three-point range. Never surprised to see Wash U on any list when it comes to hoops. The two-time national champions have some impressive wins this season, but have lost 4 of 6 as of last weekend. And while the Bears have the schedule strength and wins to validate a top 10 ranking in the eyes of the committee, taking care of business this weekend and next will certainly be very important. All right, that gives the 8th spot then to Emory, which went into St. Louis last week and beat those same Bears to even out the season series. Perhaps that was enough to earn this spot, but the strength of schedule number is better than any team in this top 16. That will come in handy approaching the 10th tournament appearance in school history. Number 7 awarded to Wisconsin Platteville, back on the rise in pursuit of the program's 4th straight tournament. This was the dominant D3 program of the 90s, winning 4 titles in a 9-year run. What's gotten them back to this position? Steady and stingy defense and a really good test in region and conference. The Christopher Newport men joined the ladies on the show today, and you know this team will be a tough out. National semifinalists in 2016 and 2019, the last time a full tournament was held. There's no reason to think a trip to Fort Wayne isn't a strong possibility. A big front line takes no prisoners, leading the country in blocks, also top 5 in the country in rebounding margin. Into the top 5 we go next with 1997 national champion Illinois Wesleyan earning this spot. The top defense in the CCIW will look to make life difficult on any opponent, including these 7 ranked opponents the Titans have taken down this season. This is trending towards the program's first tournament berth since 2018. And the same could be said for a team at number 4, where Wesleyan is having a phenomenal season in a loaded region and conference to edge closer to the first tournament berth in 4 years. The NESCAC's top offensive team this season has averaged 92 points per game its last 4 times on the floor and is winning with an offense against defensive-minded teams more often than not. All right, the final 3 begins with Marietta carrying the torch for Region 7. No team in the country taking care of the basketball better, giving it away only 8 times per game. This has helped them run off 19 straight wins without a loss since before Thanksgiving. It's an impressive run of wins, many of them coming against ranked opponents, as the Pioneers are on approach to their 10th NCAA tournament. 2 to go, Randolph-Macon takes the 2 spot, heading towards an 18th tournament appearance. And remember that last loss I mentioned by Marietta? Yep, it was the Yellow Jackets who took them down. The only blemish this season came at the hands of Christopher Newport for Randolph-Macon, and that was 18 games ago. One of just a handful of teams in the country holding opponents below 60 points. It is the ODAC's best defense. And the committee gives the top spot in the country to Wisconsin-Oshkosh, who are still the reigning champions of D3 basketball. A 3-year wait to officially repeat may sound a little bit odd, but the Titans won't care about it if they can cut down the nets in Fort Wayne next month. 9 impressive wins against ranked opponents this year for the WIAC's best defense, but the conference championship coming up will certainly be a big first postseason test. So there you have it, all 16 teams ranked as the committee found it through action from this past weekend. We bring Mike back in. And Mike, I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked earlier too. As you guys went through all those different data points and you're trying to separate teams, whether it's 1 versus 2, or maybe even somewhere you could see those head-to-head battles that actually had teams right next to each other in the line, how difficult is that to pick the right one or find the right combination of them to determine, okay, this team nudges ahead of this one?
It's always a challenge, right? Because you're dealing with sensational resumes. Every one of these teams have just exemplary and great resumes. So they all have pretty good and high winning percentage. They all have really strong SOSs. I think for us, the separating point was quality of wins, which often appear as the regionally ranked wins. That's probably the thing that ends up tipping the scale a little bit for our committee, is not only how many games have you won against what kind of schedule, but what is the quality wins? Our committee's really hunting for quality wins. And so if you look at our top 16 here, most of them have a lot of regionally ranked wins, and most of them have really good regionally ranked wins.
All right, the anticipation obviously is very high. As you guys started to put together this entire list of 16 teams, how much more anticipation is there when you see how good the quality of basketball is, and certainly from your perspective inside a locker room, understanding how much these student athletes want this opportunity to finally have a championship on the horizon?
Yeah, well, there's no question our committee was energized by this process. This was a lot of fun. It was a great reminder of how fortunate we are to get to do this, to be the members of the national committee. And certainly you can just feel the excitement kind of grow throughout Division III as we approach the tournament. And absolutely, you start to get a sense of the excitement student athletes are getting to have the opportunity to play again in a tournament, to be doing this again. And so this was just a great exercise and hopefully builds a lot of buzz for our tournament and kind of where we are right here in the moment and just the excitement of what's coming next.
You mentioned the buzz. You guys have work still to do. The bracket is not complete. This isn't even what the bracket necessarily is going to look like when it comes to those 16 teams. So what does the next 10 days or so look like in terms of that buildup of anticipation and the work to be done?
Yeah, the next step obviously is the next regional ranking, which will come out early next week, and that's a significant one because it's the third one, and it's really starting to lay the foundation for what will take place on Selection Sunday. And we're just paying attention to games. The committee members are texting each other during the week about results that we've seen and kind of what that might do to resumes or their region. And the momentum just builds as we get closer and closer, and you start to get a sense of what teams may ultimately be in the top 16, what teams will ultimately host, and then, sort of who's in the driver's seat towards those 20 at-large bids and what teams might steal an at-large bid because they lose in their tournament. And that's just going to all take place, and we start to assemble it and make those decisions on Sunday.
Mike, appreciate your time. There's a lot of different things I could say good luck to coming up in the next couple of weeks of the things that you have responsibility. I know there's a lot going on in your world. We appreciate the time.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. Thank you for having us on. I want to mention Megan and I are going to hop over to Hoopsville here and join Dave McHugh for his Hoopsville show and kind of dig a little deeper into these top 16s on both sides. So people that are watching, if you want to come over and join us, Megan and I are going to hop over there right now.
Awesome. We would look forward to learning even more about it. There's a lot of anticipation in it, and we cannot wait to see the final product when the entire field is put into the bracket in just under 2 weeks' time. For the 16 teams we unveiled tonight, there's a very good chance that they all hear their names called in just under 2 weeks. We get things going with the selection shows coming up on Monday, February the 28th. Games will begin later that week on March the 4th with the final 16 teams moving on to the third round the following weekend. After March the 12th, our final 4 teams punch their tickets to Fort Wayne, where the national semifinals and championship will be held at Allen County War Memorial Coliseum. You can watch the semifinals right here before the championship can be seen on the CBS Sports Network. As for the ladies, it is much of the same with the selection show and first 2 rounds of games taking place the week of February the 28th. Third and fourth round games tip off on March 11th and the 12th, but the semifinal schedule will be slightly different than the men. The final 4 teams are heading to Pittsburgh and UPMC Cooper Fieldhouse, but the semifinals take place on Thursday, March the 17th on NCAA.com. CBS Sports Network will now have the championship game coming up at 2 p.m. Eastern on March the 19th. All right, we hope that this has only added to your anticipation for this year's tournaments. Players, coaches, and administrators have sacrificed a lot to get back to this opportunity, and both brackets may have the best action we have ever seen. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Will Haskett. We will see you back right here in just 11 days to set the fields for the 2022 Division III Basketball Championships.
There's an energy swelling out beyond the limits of your expectations. A universe where fandom reigns supreme. Once you're in it, it changes you. Instead of one of one, you're one of many. A blissful sea of chaos. Go beyond your limits and enter the NCAA universe. Get your seats today at ncaa.com/tickets.